Hey, welcome to another episode of the Do Good Work podcast. Today, I'm talking to Natalie Gingrich. Natalie is the founder of the Ops Authority, where she certifies and mentors women who leverage their natural skill sets of operations and administration to help them earn an income while doing what goes most naturally for them. She merged her corporate career with her entrepreneurial learnings to create the Director of Operations Certification Program, the only strategic operations certification for leaders. And she continually pours into operation experts on her weekly podcast, The Ops Authority. And she is on a mission to work with female professionals who specialize in small business operations at the strategic level and equip them with the executive skills they need to leverage their leadership abilities, take charge of their careers, and create work that complements their life. Natalie, welcome to the pod.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here.
I know it's been a while since we last spoke, and I'm so excited to talk about one specific thing that you mentioned in our first call that stuck with me because it made me think. It was around the dichotomy of someone's mindset or the way that they think, that typically only around, in your experience, 3% of the population can think both with the operational technical ability for process orientation, for workflows, etc., and be creative. Can you unpack this for us?
Yeah. So I think this may be another way of looking at that, but I see so many people who are in what I will call a Frankenstein role, someone
Hmm.
who is, and I'll define that by someone who is doing operational work as well as marketing work at the same time. So we can look at this as right brain and left brain. You can look at this as integrator and visionary if you follow the rocket fuel work that has been done. There's a lot of different ways that we can look at it. But anytime we naturally, like we are born in most of us, 97% of us are born with a focus in one of those two, we'll call them disciplines. Because in my work, I look at it as marketing or creative or versus operations.
Mm.
And everyone has, and most people have an inclination into one of those. We lean into those most naturally. Oh, I'm not going to say that both of us, all of us, every person who's listening, we have stretched ourselves to try to go into like against the grain, if you will. And have we been successful? Can you make yourself successful? Absolutely. But in my work, I'm always trying to find and help other people find the work that comes most natural to them. If we can leverage our innate gifts and skills, if you do the work to find out what side, what path that you are on, you're going to really find yourself in either, we'll call it marketing creative or operations and processes. You're going to find yourself in one of those buckets. But that 3%, let's call them a unicorn. I don't know.
Mhm.
But those 3%, they're really hard to come by.
Mhm.
And as businesses or business leaders or team leaders, I think we have to be really careful about not trying to create roles or responsibilities where we find a conflict of those two, where we put that
Mm.
Frankenstein or that hybrid role together and expect someone to be wildly successful with every single task or responsibility that we give them.
'Cause let's talk about that. Because I mean, this is fascinating to me. Again, that little sentence stuck with me for, I don't know, how
Yeah.
long has it been? 6 months? I don't even know, because I resonate a lot with that statement. But how does this look in actuality when you're working with teams, when you're working with founders, when you're working with operations people, creative people? How do you distinguish between the 2 without the obvious, right, like surface level? Like, are you more creative or are you more operations based? Well, how do you actually distinguish that in actuality? And if someone is in a Frankenstein role, how do you assess where the best approach is? And is that even sustainable long term for someone to be in a Frankenstein role?
Yeah. So when I do education on this, I find that people initially, like even your response as you're listening to this, you may be like, oh, well, there's no way I could change my business into having what people refer to as like siloed roles inside of their business.
Mhm.
However, if you want high performing teams, you want people doing the work that they do most natural, that comes the easiest to them, that is the most fulfilling. And so we all like high achieving, ambitious people, we all love a stretch exercise. We have to make sure that we're stretching them in the area, we'll say the discipline, marketing or operations, in which serves them best. It's naturally, we're curious people and we'll try to like cross pollinate. And so I think as a leader, understanding what you need in your business and something I teach on often, and it really comes back to the question that you are asking is how does this really look in real life? So I think of a pyramid on each side, both marketing and operations. And at the very tip top of that pyramid, we have what I call a visionary. Let me define the pyramid really quick. The tip top is a visionary. Underneath that is strategy. Underneath that is management. And at the very bottom base, most important is implementation. Okay. So we'll go from bottom up: implementation, manager, strategy, vision. Yeah, it's a pyramid. So the bottom is the biggest. You have to have implementation on both sides, right?
Mm.
The vision is really carried by one person. And for really small businesses like mine and yours, and a lot of people that we're working with, I would say under 20 to 30, even up to 50 million, really small teams. Some of them are nano teams and some of them are really small teams. But there's a lot of money and a lot of revenue that has to come into play before we would classify ourselves as even a medium-sized business. So
Oh yeah,
for
mid
those,
markets.
for those small teams, we have to be lean. Like we
Hmm.
have to be lean. So to state your question in a different way, how do we maintain lean teams and still do work that serves us best without overinflating in labor cost, et cetera?
Hmm.
I take that pyramid. The bottom is implementation. The top is visionary. That visionary is you. And a lot of times before we can replace ourselves or fire ourselves from doing particular roles, we are the people that have to hold on to that as the leader of the business. We are holding on to all of the layers that we cannot outsource, the layers that we can't fire ourselves from. So remember, we've got marketing, a marketing pyramid, and we have an operations pyramid. So we've
Hmm.
got two pyramids. Why do founders and CEOs in the first 3 to 5 years of their business, why do businesses fail? Right? It's not the inability to get clients
Mm.
most of the time. It's not the inability to have a clever solution. It's the ability to actually scale and have people in there to do the work with you,
Yeah.
alongside you. So you get burned out, you get frustrated. Well, why does that feeling, that emotion come about? Remember the two pyramids, remember the 4 different layers. Without good labor, you're doing basically 8 people's jobs. So you've got four layers, you've got 2 sides of your business. Of course you're exhausted. You're trying to market, you're trying to put in systems, you're trying to be the salesperson, you're trying to do branding, there's so many facets to business. And so in effort of me and my search of helping businesses to become sustainable, to
Mhm.
keep themselves engaged in the passionate work that they are performing and they really feel meant to do, we started to help people at the bottom layer. Like, let's start at the bottom on the side of the business that you are least inclined to. Majority of the people that I work with and come into, I'm an operational expert. So the majority of people that are reaching out to me are very gifted in marketing. A lot of your
Mhm.
visionaries, honestly, a lot of our CEOs, a lot of people who have enterprising and great ideas, who love to innovate, they tend to be gifted more in the creative, in the marketing, in the brand part, which is the front side of business. So that's that marketing pyramid. It is not hard for them to perform a lot of the tasks that make up the marketing side. Now they think of operations and they are just bamboozled. They do, there's so many, there's every time I say that word, I actually laugh. I shouldn't say it anymore. But they loathe the operations. The thought of them hiring somebody, the thought of them creating processes, an employee handbook, of working inside of the technical parts of the work sounds very unattractive. It sounds hard. It sounds laborious. And so what do they do as a default? They ignore it. They go as long as they can. And in my work, what I see is these passionate people who've got these great ideas, who will go out there and be able to sell the work, get in front of it, talk to it, they'll sell it, and then the delivery, the fulfillment of that promised
Mhm.
product that they're selling comes very difficult. And that's where reputational damage can sometimes be unavoided and get reversed. And that's why I am always working like, where do you feel like you are the strongest? In the
Mhm.
front of the business or in the back of the business? Whichever one is more void for you, let's start at the bottom and start bringing people in so that you can get rid of that work, so it can actually exist inside of your business. And then once we get something that the opposite side, for most people, is that operational side stable, then
Mhm.
we can start firing ourselves. Once we get revenue, once we get a return on investment from the people that we brought into the company, now
Mhm.
we can start firing you as the CEO or the founder from those lower level marketing tasks. And then you
Mm.
just start moving up the pyramid, the aspiration, the hope of one day getting to being the CEO, the visionary of one of those pyramids. And of course, that takes time. It takes healthy profit margins, and it takes being a tenacious leader because none of this happens overnight.
No, absolutely. I love the fact that you gave us like a framework to look at both the ops and the marketing side for four different functions: the implementation, the management, the strategy, and the vision. And I mean, the strategy and the vision being like separate roles, but separate functions, really execution parts. And sometimes we do wear those 8 or even 12 hats, right? Something for product fulfillment.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely have seen it on the point where the product or the service, sometimes we're extremely good at selling or we oversell, and the fulfillment sometimes lacks and has issues at that front. So tell me a little bit more about, like, you said that you implemented, you put people in there. Is it staffing? Can you kind of explain that for us to understand?
Yeah, I actually have a couple of businesses. One is a certification for directors of operations, and then another business of mine is in that staffing and that fulfillment of labor. And we do a lot of labor strategy for small businesses and hence the pyramid, hence really being obsessed with helping people to step out of the things that don't fill them up. But naturally, in both of those businesses, as an expression of me and where my interest is, it's like helping people to do the work that just comes most natural to them,
Mm.
whether that is on the brand or the CEO or the leader side, or whether it's on a candidate or an applicant side. I want everyone. I mean, ultimately, when you're doing the work that lights you up, it's a lot easier to put your proverbial shoes on and put your feet on the floor every single
Yeah.
morning and have energy when we show up. And I think a lot of times for a lot of our lives, we have lived and been in experiences and jobs and roles where we have just kind of trudged through. We hated Monday mornings. We looked forward
Mhm.
to Fridays. And I'm not saying that I'm expecting some euphoric state, but by all means, I feel like I am living a completely different space than I was 15 years ago, 10 years
Mhm.
ago in corporate, and things were really out of my control. I was forced to do things that didn't light me up, and it worked for that point in my life. And just seeing the opposite side is like, yes, it's a completely different feeling. And I want everyone to feel the exact same thing because it's available to everybody today.
Yeah, that's the key thing because right now, I mean, there'll always be this idea in the marketplace or this idea by different quote unquote thinkers. Maybe not even call them thinkers, but it's like you have to give in to the suck or embrace the drudgery right now and for you to have an outcome. And sometimes we kind of get stuck there. You embrace it, but then you don't get yourself out of it. And I
Yeah.
think that can become like a perpetual issue as you find growth. Well, tell me a little bit more about, so you were in corporate, then you saw this opportunity and you're helping. What was your drive? What was your mission?
Yeah, I spent 15 years in corporate America working in HR, lots of HR, facets of HR, and moved into project management. At the end of my career, the very end of my career, I was the chief of staff for the CEO of a Fortune 150 company. Had an awesome opportunity to see really operations holistically. And Raul, even to that point, 15 years having built my way into executive leadership inside of a very male dominated world, I would have never used the word operations in the way that I am today, which is
Hmm.
really strange. The company itself was a financial services company. And so we didn't, I mean, I think a lot of times in my mind at that point, like operations was a term that was really used for fulfillment of a product, right?
Mm.
So I would think about more of the logistics part of operation. And in my journey of really going from chief of staff to stepping out on my own, I felt led to exit the corporate cycle because my children were young, they were growing up, and I was just missing out on a lot of things. I grew up in
Mm.
a single parent family and I wasn't living that same life for myself. And so I did have a few more options and just a different state and day and age, so
Mhm.
many opportunities around me. Now it was scary as heck to step out of that very rewarding, financially rewarding career, but it was really, I became obsessed with legacy. Like all I
Mm.
did, I remember I very vividly, like even as we're speaking right now, I remember walking around this building, actually quite important, like I had a very important role. Everybody knew me in the company. I could have gone anywhere in the company. I fully
Mm.
expected to lead the HR function in the next 10 years of my career. And I had this just burning desire to be different for my kids, to have
Mm.
a different experience. And it makes me emotional thinking about it because I like looking back, it's like I thought that and I made it happen. Like
Yeah.
I was so obsessed with I want these babies who were 6 and 9 at the time. I want them to see something different than I had the opportunity to. And so I became obsessed with on the quest for what does legacy and what can that actually look
Mhm.
like in my life. My mother, your parents probably didn't have these options. And it's because the economic differences, the opportunities are just so different. And I just started to see, like, I really was thinking of entrepreneurship. I was not thinking of what I'm doing today at all. I was really thinking of something very different. And I knew it was going to be around helping people because that's just naturally what I have always done.
Mhm.
The easiest thing for me to show up for is to nurture, to support, to mentor.
So
I
you are,
led a
yeah.
Yeah, and so I wanted, of course, to do that, but I didn't know what that really was gonna look like. I did not think that those gifts and skills that I was learning and practicing every day as the chief of staff would end up really becoming my day-to-day life. I exited corporate and I started a business, which was, now looking back, I just didn't know the words for it, but it was much a life coaching business, and I did that for a short period of time, and that was just a short period of time. I think I'm too business oriented for that, but it was a great, like, view into what small business operations look like. Because to that
Mm.
point, I had only seen really large operations with
Yeah.
lots of resources, whether that
Mhm.
be time, people, or just skill around me. So now doing this really lean was cool. And I will say that's been 8 years ago, and just the place that we were from a digital perspective 8 years ago is vastly different than where we are today. But I just started networking. I had no idea that virtual assistant, that project management, like, I thought all of that was reserved for corporate roles. And I came in, I think that Facebook was really, I know it was very different back then. Making like one-to-one connections was actually pretty easy back then.
Mhm.
And a lot of organic relationships. Now you had to put effort in, but I was really blessed and rewarded with a lot of great quality people on the other end of the line, and organically built friendships and relationships. And we were meeting over Zoom before Zoom was really cool and
Yeah.
standard. And actually,
I think
this
it
is
was
like
Skype back then.
Skype.
Skype was
Yes.
the thing. I remember getting on calls and like, "Whoa, what time zone are you in?" She's like from the other side of the world,
Yes.
and like another dude from another part of the country.
Yes. And that's so, and honestly, even dating us further, Periscope was the big thing. Like,
Oh yeah,
that
I
was the
remember that.
social platform to be on. But right, we're really sounding like internet
Hey, I love
dinosaurs.
those days. Those were the days, man.
Yeah, they were the foundation for where I am today. But I met some really great people in those organic relationships, just started to give naturally as I do, be a good listener and give what's on your mind and no judgment. And everyone comes to the table. And all of a sudden, I started building their businesses as friends. And then I
Mm.
started to just, I mean, I was listening to operators naturally are listening for gaps, right? That's how I can define an operator. If you can see a gap
Mm.
and want to put a solution to it, you've got a pretty good tendency to be a logical, analytical thinker. So
Like
I
that.
started doing that, and it was helpful for them. I wasn't even coming in there thinking about a business. This is at the same time I'm building what was going to become like a life coaching business, right? I wasn't listening to them for business, but all of my experiences, the way that my brain thinks was giving them these like business blessings, if you will. And we were partnering. And before long, I was like, I should do project management. That's going to be the kicker.
Uh-huh.
So that opened up a lot of opportunity for me. And honestly, it was a very quick path for me as a service provider to become self-sustainable, to replace my income, a large portion of my income that I was just earning it differently, still
Mhm.
doing it in a way that really felt good. So that's kind of the long story
I love
of
that.
how I got to this point. And from there, I was servicing clients, and these clients were like, there's something different here. The difference was the strategic view of how to run businesses. So it wasn't
Mm.
coming in at that, what was replaceable was that entry level, that
The
implementation.
function side, but the actual
Yeah.
strategy, you brought a different
Yeah.
vision and a strategy to the table.
Yeah. And small businesses were thinking they don't deserve that. Like, I don't
Mm.
deserve that. It's up to me as the leader to come with all the strategy and all of the vision and put all of this together. Most leaders don't want to manage, right? And so they were like, whoa, like, there's somebody out here who can be my counterpart in this business. And I tell this all the time, but every leader wants a leader, right?
Mm.
Every leader wants a boss, is another way to put it. I've had some of the most
Yep.
stoic people. I've had some of the most innovative people. I've had some of the most ridiculous humans on the other end of the line just saying, thank you for being my boss. Like, Thank you for being the person. You're the only person who could come in here and tell me that this is not right or this
I
is
love it.
wrong or deliver a great idea or spot something. And so that was really fuel to my fire and put me on a whole new space.
Yeah, we all secretly want to be led, but I think you're hitting on a heartstring where when this is your business, when you're running, I mean, specific for small businesses, right? When you're running it on yourself, it's all on you. It's quote unquote your baby. But then from there, someone coming in and taking care at that level, the strategic level, it does alleviate
Yeah.
a lot of stressors that you're not doing it alone. So I'm always fascinating when I talk to founders, meet founders, or even see like I was talking to a client the other day and we were solving like a really ridiculous problem. Like, oh my gosh, like all these things that we're going through. Then I took a second, like, you know what? Isn't it fascinating that this began from her vision or from this person's vision?
Mhm.
Same thing where you're at right now. Isn't it fascinating that where you're at right now based on a vision you had maybe 5, 8
Absolutely.
years ago? It's like it's incredible to that it can materialize. And now you're materializing this to also training people and others. And I kind of want to lean into that, like how you took your initial desire to provide the value to small businesses, but how now you're focused on values and a mission. And I want to lean into that as well. Can you share us a little about that?
Yeah, I mean, the certification was born over I have no problem speaking, getting on stages, and at that time and day and age of our space, pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, I was traveling quite a bit. I was able to connect in lots of masterminds and being on stage. And so naturally, I was exposing the same conversation we're having today with people saying, you know what, I actually could use an operator, or man, I could really use a whatever it may look like. They were wanting that operational support. And I was doing a lot of education around what that looks like and that it is accessible to you, that, these are the different forms that it can come in. And there's a lot of people out there who have these skills. They may not know exactly your discipline or your industry. There are a lot of operators on this planet. Like the majority of people are operational.
Hmm.
Okay. So there maybe we need to train them. Maybe we need to be patient with them. Maybe we need to be very clear in what we're looking for so that we attract the right people. This is something that can really be can provide you a bridge to stay in love with your work a little bit longer instead of that stat of 50% of businesses closing in 5 years. I think that's the stat. You don't have to be that person. You don't have to love what you do on day 1 and loathe it on day 400. Like it shouldn't be that way. And so anyway, I was out and about and talking about this, and before you know it, I was overbooked. I was working way more hours than I was even in corporate America. Yes, I was earning a fine penny, but I told you the whole legacy thing. And
Yeah.
then now I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I'm grit. I am spread so thin. My kids are not seeing me. It's just, it doesn't feel great right now. So I started to think, goodness, how can I get operators into other people's hands? And that's ultimately what needed to happen. And I didn't have the capacity. So I'll tell you a short story, but I was like, "Oh, I've networked with lots of people. I know how to spot an operator." And I'd said, "Oh, Earl, you know what? I've got Betty would be awesome. Talk to Betty." And then you guys would go into work together and you'd call me back and you'd be like, "Nat, Betty is so this, that, and the other. Betty doesn't know this. You said she was good at operations, but this is not happening." Right
Mhm.
now, I feel like, "Oh, Earl, I'm totally an empath. I'm totally an Enneagram 2, if you will." So I'm like, "Oh," I've frustrated
Thanks, and that's on
him.
you, yeah.
Yeah. So I went to work with how do I do this better in a more in a way that's just way more solid? Like, how do I tell Raul this person is really good at operations versus me taking that from a conversation or 3 that we have had together? So I spent 1 year. I'm a fact finder, so it took me a lot of time. I don't move fast. I'm an accidental CEO. I'm a natural and a powerful COO. So in my own business, we move very slow. Like I am super honest that I am creative, I am innovative, but I am slow. And so I'm an operator. So I went to work with what is it that makes these relationships that these business relationships healthy and well,
Mhm.
and actually able to scale, to deliver on promises, heck, to define the promise. So what was it about me? And I went to work. I would perform my work Monday through Thursday. And on Friday, I would recap every single thing I did throughout the week.
Okay, dang,
I
okay.
would write down this. And then I just started putting buckets together. I started to say, okay, this was strategy. This was this. What are the parts of the strategy? And I just dissected my work for almost it was 10 months, but a full year, really pulling back what it was and how it was that I didn't know I was successful, right? I was doing
You
this.
just did it, right? And it
Right.
had the profitable outcome.
Yeah, and people loved it, and they were so wonderful to refer me, but I had no capacity. So I put the structure together that created the certification. And really, the certification was so that I felt good about saying, "Well, you and Betty are going to be a really good match."
Mhm.
And so the certification has just, it's taken off. It's been very well received. It's pretty much like getting a master's degree in operations for small business, specific to small business.
That's
We don't
awesome.
touch on logistics or inventory or anything like that, but it's the logistical parts of, it's the operational parts of running a small business today. A lot of digital based businesses.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that's the space that I focus primarily. We're just growing substantially at that
Yeah.
rate. No, it's fascinating to be able to for you to dissect and do a retro specifically on your own work. I think that a lot of us, specifically me, can benefit just from doing that alone. Like, what is the thing that makes it tick? What is the thing that actually makes it work?
Because you don't see that it's actually valuable or different.
That's the
It
issue. Yeah,
takes,
until someone else tells you about it and you get a nice
yeah,
testimonial, like, oh, okay, then this is what I should
yeah.
lean into. But other than that, it's yeah, we always take for granted what comes easy to us, and we don't see the value in it. Sometimes that can be the crux of the entrepreneur. As we design, and we're also assessing ourselves as you're listening to this podcast, like, what is your natural skill set? Where do you lean into? Are you operational focused? Are you marketing focused? And then I think going back to your point, like the values, your values were around
Mhm,
family, being present, to not being overworked, to being able to
mhm,
build differently and also contribute to help others because you're people focused and you really care about the other individual on the other side of the line, be it a Skype, Zoom call,
mhm,
whatever it is. How do you share that? Part of it, business, and this is like on the business front, is the attraction of the right people to come through, the fulfillment of that specific promise. But it's what builds your brand, it's what builds your messaging, and it's also how you probably run your company day in and day out. Like your people who work with you internally have that shared value, that shared system of belief around a very specific common belief about life. How do you encourage others like your train, like the people that you train to live a life or to find the right clients that align with their values versus not aligning with their values?
yeah. It starts with just doing the work.
Mm,
And it is amazing to me how often and how many businesses and people, right? At the beginning of a business, it's really one person. And so
mhm,
it starts with that one person, but taking the time to identify what your values are and knowing that it doesn't have to be perfect the first time you write them down. Most people who do values work, who start with thinking about, who want to do the exercise of what are my values? Let's define my values. They're going to start at some really high level adjective, loyalty, honesty, integrity. Those are the ones that come up the first, the beginning for everybody. And it's still okay. It's like, put those on the board. And if I became obsessed with what those values are for me as a person,
mm,
not trying to figure out what looked good or what would feel good to you on the other end of the line or what my husband would say my values are. It's like, and it's a process. It's
mhm,
what is Natalie? Who is Natalie? And what
mm.
do I stand for to help people define their values? If this is new work to you, what makes you tick and what ticks you off? That's like the easiest way to come up with the
Yeah.
beginning of your values. And I wanted to work with people. I wanted to talk to people. We want to work with people. I know that if you think back to relationships, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a familial relationship, whether it's a boss, whether it's your work people, your church people, your neighborhood people, who do you like? We
Mm,
all like and are most attracted to the people who have something in that are something similar to us. And your beliefs are so innate and so ingrained in you. I tell people, hey, if you find 5 people over the course of your life that you feel like you were the most connected to, and they can be from different parts of your life, and you go to breakfast on Saturday morning, you look at those people individually who don't even know one another, but you sit across from them and you say, what do I love about Sally, about Bill, about Ben, about Natalie? They all have something in common, and that commonality is a complete reflection of you. So that's a little bit off topic there, but
No, it's a good abstract model, mental model for us to think about. And I was actually just going through it myself, like kind of just thinking about that. So I think just to reinforce you, this is not off topic.
good. But values became a real differentiator because we,
Mm,
especially at the early ages or early stages of business, when we're just trying to make it, right? We say yes to everybody, right? I mean, if you would give me $1, I would no doubt give you $4 in return in my effort because of who I am. But does that mean that $4 is going to feel like $8? Does that feel like, you know what I mean? I feel like
Mhm.
we get into a lot of we make a lot of poor client decisions and partner decisions in the early stages of business because we avoid ourselves of the
Mm.
values. Now, it takes work, it takes strength to stand up and to uphold those values. But the fundamental piece here is we have got to understand our values and know that it's an evolving body of work. Wherever we start
Mm.
is not where we're going to end. I look at my values every year you know, instead of doing your New Year's, like, what's your word of the year or what's your resolutions going to be? I have come back to actually, my whole family does that, but we come back to what are your values? What do you
Mm.
believe in? And knowing that who you are at my kids, who you are at 14 does not mean that's who you're going to be at 28. And for me, who I was last year doesn't have to be the exact. I mean, it doesn't change that much from year to year when you get at this point when you're an old lady. But your values, it's so important to know those and just refine them year after year. It
Mm.
is exactly what you said. I mean, I attract to me the most wonderful community ever because we lead all of our
Mhm.
marketing, all of our messaging, they're authentic. They're actually me. I'm not trying to sell something and be cooler than I am and be younger, hipper, more fit. It's like it's always out there. And it's how we hire, it's how we train, it's who we attract, it's in our messaging, it's everywhere. But I know at the beginning of business, we're frustrated because we're trying to attract people. The only way to truly attract people who want to hear your message, I mean, I'm not teaching you anything you don't know, but is to be you. And
Yeah.
values give you structure to how to express who you are. And from a team building perspective, you'll see it in every single one of our job descriptions. I want to attract and repel people through a job description. How
Mm.
do I do that? You know what? My values don't have to be yours. But if you don't share any of my values, we're going to have a hard time like being real in our
Yeah.
work relationship. We spend too much time here to be fake or to just tolerate people. So it's a huge piece. It's a differentiator in our hiring practices.
No, I can complete. I love the exercise. I love the fact, and a lot of you might be listening to this and think that a lot of this quote unquote is soft skill work, but it is essentially what drives
Yeah.
the the actual big needle movers in the company. If it's from your sales, it's from your marketing, your positioning in the marketplace, your unique point of view, putting your flag on the ground, and it also will qualify and have you, from my experience, have the right types of clients, increase your average order value, lifetime value, have your team be happier, be able to fulfill and hit home runs. And it really just goes back to maybe it's a good thing or a bad thing, the
Yeah.
founder. And it's that sometimes, like, I remember having a new, like a coaching client or someone that has come through. It's like, I need to become a better person because this person is depending on me for this very specific thing. And that's in the
Mhm.
beginning, but also how do you expand that on every facet of your company, for every team member, every interaction? And that's, in my opinion, the responsibility, the maturity of a leader who leads not only just with integrity, but in alignment with who they are. And I think that's pretty rare, in my opinion, to see all the time in the online world. So it's pretty
Yeah.
cool to see with you, Natalie.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Cool.
I
So for all
totally
listeners
agree.
out there, no, it's real, it's raw, and I appreciate it. For our listeners out there, where's the best place for people to one, thank you for being on today and to learn a little bit more about you?
So I have a podcast that we produce every single week, and you can find it at the Ops Authority Podcast. And I hang out on LinkedIn most of the time, so you can find me, Natalie Gingrich. It looks like Gingrich, so I'll say it that way. And I'd love to connect with you guys.
Cool. We'll put those links in the show notes. Natalie, thanks for being on.
Yes, thank you for having me.
If you found value in today's podcast, please consider sharing this with someone that you believe could also benefit from this episode. You never know, you may be the catalyst that opens them up to a new way of operating their business and experiencing life. As always, it's an honor to be a small part of your journey. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.